She was devastated. She laid waste. And so I think it's important to recognize what was going on. Now, for you note takers, two truths. There are two truths, and you can't write one without the other. The first truth is this: sin is in the world. I hate to say it, it's just going to happen. None of us are exempt from it. In some form or another, we're going to reap the consequences of sin, whether it's those close to us or someone we may not know, but in the selfishness, in the attitudes, anything that we do that is a lack of love. God gives us two commandments: love him, love people. And love doesn't seek its own. Love seeks the other person's well-being. And I find this interesting that what happens is, here in this place, we come face to face with this first and brutal truth: sin is in the world. Even those that of your own family, even those that you love, even those that you should trust, sin happens because it's in the world. And there are going to be times where it's going to be a physical act. Sometimes it's going to be a verbal word that's going to rip you apart, that's going to devastate you. Keep in mind, sin is in the world. That's the first truth. The second truth is just as needed is this: she's not alone. She may not have her brother. She may not have anyone else, but God is with her. He will never leave her nor forsake her. And so it's important to recognize that she is not alone. And so God, no one else does, and even more than she does, God understands her suffering. And these are the truths you have to take home, because what happens is this: God understands the myriad of ramifications this one sin has done to her and what it has caused, what it's going to bring out. And so I want you to just kind of go through and recognize with me where Amnon takes this one moment of just fulfilling the lust of his flesh and violating his sister. And then this is what's happening now. The first thing that happens to her is this: even before she comes into his room, she's objectified. That he says, I want my brother Absalom's sister. Do you understand? Now, if his brother Absalom is his brother, then what does that mean? Well, his brother Absalom's sister, that's his full sister as well, it's his sister too. It's his half sister. But he needs to what? He needs to lessen her. He needs to objectify her. He needs to make her not God's child. He needs to make her not as precious. He needs to not respect her. He needs to not give her the dignity. He needs to not give her the honor. He has to move her to a place of an object so that I can have my will. Because if it's someone who's important, if it's someone not that you say is important from your heart, you know is important, if it's God's child, and if you do the commandment to love, then what? There is going to be this honor. There is going to be this dignity. There is going to be a respect that is given to that person. And I think what happens is this, is she's just objectified. He's not respecting her. There is no dignity. There is no honor. And so when we look to this, Tamar is his sister, but he doesn't even want to go there. And so Amnon moves Tamar from being his sister and from being forbidden fruit to being what? Oh, it's just an object. And I can do what I want with an object if it's an object that I want. And so it's amazing that even though that relationship that he desired with his sister was forbidden, he twisted in his mind, he did these mental gymnastics to reduce her to a point of being an object. And all this, no fault of hers. Keep in mind, this is no fault of hers. Not only does he first make her an object, he objectifies her. And then what happens? There's this physical violation and this physical trauma that begins to happen to her. And the pain and the fear and the shame and the helplessness. All these things are going on, and these these physical scars and emotional scars and spiritual scars, all this thing. Can you imagine that fear and the panic and the helplessness because he just simply stronger than she is? He's going to simply say, I can do what I want to do. And so that fear, that helplessness, that where's my safety, all those things are going on with this physical violation and trauma. And then from the physical, then it brings into the what? To the emotional. And now you got to live with it. Now your brain keeps thinking, did I do something? Was it something of my fault? What's going on here? Keep in mind that at this point, her honor was stolen. Her honor was stolen through no fault of her own. And it was a betrayal by her own family member. Can you imagine this what's going on in your mind and your heart? Here's someone who's supposed to take care of me, and I should trust and I should love that you're going to love me in the way that's right and proper according to Scripture, and you're not. And you can't feel safe. You can't feel comforted. And at this point, what begins to happen is through this emotional trauma that is here, she now has to doubt her brother. I can't trust Amnon. I can't even trust Absalom, my brother, because he says, oh, it's okay. Just kind of write it off. No big deal. Don't say anything to anybody. Just it'll be okay. Hold your peace. Do not take this thing to heart. What horrible advice. And at the same time, her trust even with her dad. He's the one who said, hey, yep, go to your brother, make the cakes in his house. And so the trust is now, who do I trust? If I can't trust these men in my life, who do I go to? Who do I trust? And it is so incredible that with this anguish, with this distress that she's beginning to experience, after her initial response to this act that was done, what we begin to see is this. She's told to bottle up your emotions. You don't need to cry about this. It's I'm in charge here. We're good. We've got this covered. And the bottom line is, no, you don't. Because you got your best interest in mind. You don't have my best interest. You don't have my heart. You don't have what I'm going through at all. And so keep in mind that there is this, first objectification, a physical trauma, emotional trauma that comes. And then along with this, keep in mind that through no fault of her own, she now has a social stigma. She comes to this point where this physical violation that was done to her, it's not going to, even though it's over, it's not going to negate the disgrace. It's not going to negate the shame. It's not going to that area where her position of worth in the eyes of potential suitors is now gone. And all this, she has a social stigma of what are people going to think about me? Are they going to believe my story? Are they going to think that I had something to do with this? And this is that issue with this kind of trauma. You have no one that will listen, no one to do that. And keep in mind that her position, how people look at her in society, is going to be diminished. It's going to be lessened. And all this, once again, through no fault of her own. On top of this, what we saw was this, and this is brutal, that she lost the opportunity to marry and have a family. Unbelievable, because of one man's selfish act. That's what it says here at the end of verse 20. Tamar remained desolate. She remained uncomforted. She remained in a place of ruin and destruction in her brother's house. She could never experience the love of the engagement and the marriage and the life of a wife and a husband, the joys that can come through that, the birth of children. All this because her brother said, I'm going to do what I want to do. I don't care if it's right. I don't care if it's wrong. I don't care if it's sin. I don't care if it's not. I'm going to do what I want to do. Do you understand how sin, the ramifications go beyond just that moment? It goes on and on and on. I don't know if you've ever counseled with someone, or maybe you yourself have experienced it, or you've heard it from someone else, where there may be a couple in a marriage. And what will happen is this: there will be an argument. And in the argument, one couple will say something to the other couple that is just brutal. Brutal. And do you know what will happen? The enemy is going to back up that tape and play it, back up that tape and play it. Oh, I guess, no, back up the DVD, back up the MP3. I'm so old. He's going to just rewind it again and again and again. And you're going to hear those words again and again and again. And they're going to apologize for it. Oh, I'm sorry, I said that, I didn't mean it. But you know what? Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. And we know those things, that the enemy is going to use this again and again and again and again. Be careful. This is why God says, be careful of every word that proceeds from your mouth. He holds you accountable. There's not just a moment, but it goes on and on and on. And so think about sin. Think about what it does. And the other thing that we see is, not only does she have this lack of a family, this lack of a husband, I want you to understand this. She has no justice. There is no accountability to what her brother did. They just simply, David is just angry. He's not going to discipline him. He has to live with it. And if anyone was looking to say, what kind of reaction should we have to her, I want you to understand here, look at verse 18 of our text. It says in verse 18, now she had on a robe of many colors, for the king's virgin daughters wore such apparel. And his servant put her out and bolted the door behind her. And Tamar put ashes on her head. She tore her robe of many colors. So this robe that put her in a station of honor, it was a representation that she was this daughter of the king. It had long sleeves, long things, so she wasn't the one to work. The workers, they would have the shorter sleeves and then the shorter, outfit, so they could bend and work, and their sleeves wouldn't get in the way of their arms. And so she rips it. She literally tears this robe that's there, the robe of many colors, and she put ashes on her head. She's just mourning. She doesn't even want beauty anymore. She wants the world to see her as she feels on the inside. I feel so dirty. I want the world to see the dirt, the ashes. She puts her hand on her head and went away crying bitterly. Anguish, anguish, anguish. And I think what's so important is then her brother comes and says, hey, don't worry about it. But I think what's interesting, her initial reaction of this physical and emotional hurt, she has this deep, deep pain and the loss of her honor, the loss of all that she had taken herself to protect. And so she has this sorrow and this immense grief and the depths of the shame and the lack of worth. The stripping of her honor was dramatic. It was not just this gradual thing. It was just forceful thing done instantly. And then she's told in verse 20, hey, don't worry about it. Hold your peace. You don't have to tell anybody. It's all okay. Just keep it in. Don't worry about it. And then I think what happens is she's just told to hold her peace. She's told to keep silent. She's told not to express her sorrow. Can you imagine that? This deed that was done, and it's like a football guy that falls down and gets scraped. The coach says what? Hey, brush it off. Get up. You're fine. This isn't a football injury, and he's not the coach. She's devastated here, and what happens is she's told not to express her pain. She's told not to take the matter to heart. She's implying that the damage that was done was not that bad. It's not that bad. It's not as bad as you're making it out to be. It's as bad as she's making it out to be. Her reaction's correct. Everyone else's actions are wrong. And there's no one that she could share her hurt and her pain with. She can't go to her dad. No, it's Amnon. Amnon's fine. He's okay. We don't want to correct this. And I think what's amazing is there's no one to give her any reassurance that it wasn't her fault. No one is saying that this wasn't on you. This wasn't on you. And there should be some kind of accountability. There should be some kind of justice that's here. But there's no sympathy for her at all in this text. And I'm astounded by just how sin permeates. No one looks at this area. No one wants to do it. There's no sympathy for her. There's no one to support her emotionally. There's no real protection for her. She's shoved in her brother's house, and that's it. There's no path that she can take to have justice. There's no path that she can take to have accountability done. And if there's no justice, guess what? That makes the path for healing even more difficult to go through. Because one of the healing is what? Well, at least there was a penalty for what you've done. I'm hurting, you have to hurt in some way. There should be some kind of consequences. And so with this, there's no path for healing. And ultimately, there's no path for restoration. How do you begin to do this? And so the question comes is what can she do? What can we do when it comes to these situations? Well, the first part of it was what? Sin is in the world. The second part is this: you're never alone. That no matter what, and I think this is so important, that there can be, when you are a Christian, you can experience divine presence and divine comfort. If there's no one else, there's no one else, there's Jesus. This is the key. And so God himself can come in your heart, and God himself can bring about a renewal. And so God can bring justice. God can bring accountability. And when you put these in his hands, you trust in him, God can bring about people to support you. God can bring in those people to help guide you through this. And someone that as you go through this, you can learn to find a strength. You can learn to find this area of hope in God, but only in God. And I think what's so important is that God, at this